So here's how you can quickly and easily model a teddy bear using Maya 2025 and bring it into Unreal Engine 5.4. And this process includes adding fur using Maya and texturing the model using Substance Painter. So the idea is that you use this tutorial for any kind of creature really that you want to create hair for in Maya, and then you want to do some texturing inside of Substance and then take into Unreal. So I'm going to try and keep the steps fairly generic. And I really am going through and modeling this super fast and adding hair super fast, not making it look really very good. And then right at the end, I'm going to show you how to make it look better. All right, let's get started. And it might be tempting to just jump into Maya and get started, but we actually need to go through some steps that are going to make sure that XGen works later on. Otherwise, it really doesn't. So in Windows Explorer, create a new empty folder. Call it something like teddybear_Maya project and copy the location of where this folder is. Now open up Maya 2025, and if it asks you, create a new blank scene. Now go to File, Set Project. Then in the Look In text field at the top, just paste in the location you just set, and then click the button Set. And in the pop-up, just click Create Default Workspace. Now go to the File menu, Project Window, and click Accept. Now we need to actually save our scene file. So go to the File menu again, Save Scene As, and name this scene Teddy_Scene01, and then click Save As. All right, so make sure in the top left, this drop-down is set to Modeling. Press Spacebar so you're seeing the 4 viewports. And in the top right, I tend to make this workspace set to General. Now what I do here is I actually add an object that's built into Maya that just gives me a good idea about the scale of what I need to be modeling. So go up to the Windows menu, Content Browser, and then you're going to see that it defaults to Examples, Modeling, Sculpting Base Meshes, Bipeds, and then what you want to do is right-click on the basic head.ma and choose Import. And now with that basic head selected in your scene, go to the Channel Box Layer Editor, change all of these scales to 0.18. Then in the Poly Modeling shelf, click the snow icon, which is going to freeze the transformations. Then to the left, click the clock icon to delete the history. And now press W on your keyboard to move, and move the head up in the viewport so it's above the grid. All right, so this is the size of the model in general that we want to keep it to. So the head of any creature that we make, etc., we want it to be approximately this size. And we want it to be facing in the positive Z direction, just like this is. We consider the arrow, the blue arrow, is pointing forwards, just like the face is. So our teddy bear needs to be facing forward like that. All right, move this to the right-hand side just to get it out of the way. Now let's start modeling our teddy bear. So go to Create menu, Polygon Primitives, and add a primitive sphere or a cone or whatever you want to start with. And you'll want to scale it up. So you can just press R on the keyboard and then hover over the middle, and then you can scale it up. Then just move it up to get it clear of the grid. Then you need to adjust the subdivisions because you want as few as you can get away with and still maintain the shape. So go to the Attributes Editor and click the tab called Poly. So in this case, Polysphere. Let's change this to 12 subdivisions for each side of this polygon sphere. And you want to keep this low because otherwise our combined mesh is going to be just too many endless polygons and Maya's going to get confused. Now scale and move the polygon primitive the way you want it. And keep in mind that I'm just modeling this teddy bear super roughly. All right, so it's really important that as you're making these polygons, you're keeping the middle of the bear on that vertical Y-axis line. You really want to make sure it is symmetrical because XGen later on is going to be using that symmetry to copy the hair guides from side to side. So make sure you're not making it just off to the side or anything like that. Press 3 on the keyboard to preview what your currently selected polygon primitive will look like later when you smooth it. And you can press 1 to go back to standard mode. And now just keep adding polygon primitives to build up your character. I usually hold down Shift and then move the item to just clone it to make copies. But if you want a different type of polygon primitive, just of course go to the Create menu, Polygon Primitives, and add a cube or a cone or whatever you want to add. Now, if you want to flip any of the polygons over in 3D space, the easiest way to do it is go to the Poly Modeling shelf and click that snow icon to freeze the transformation, and then click the clock to delete history. And then in the channel box layer editor, change the scale X to -1, and that's just going to flip it horizontally in your scene. That can be really helpful. You can also right-click and hold on your primitive, and then go to Vertex. And then select groups of vertices or individual vertices and move them around to adjust the shape. And I often use Scale to do this as well. All right, so now I'm just going to fast forward a bit as I model the teddy bear with some primitives. And then I add things that are separate from the main body skin, things that aren't going to be covered by hair. So the nose and both of the eyes for now. All right, now I'm just going to go to File, Save Scene As, and save it. Then I'm going to make a primitive shape that I'm going to use to cut out the mouth. And actually, I'm just going to name these parts. So I'm going to call this one the face chunk. And call this one the mouth cutout. And then I'm going to duplicate those and add backup to the end just to remind myself that those are backups. It's always a good idea to do that before you make booleans. Then I'm going to click on the face chunk and hold down Control and click on the mouth cutout. Then go to Mesh, Booleans, Difference A minus B. And then in the Poly Modeling shelf, I'm going to click on Freeze Transformations, Delete History. And I can see the geometry through the mouth. So I'm just going to move the face chunk and the nose forward a bit. And I'm going to quickly add a tongue. All right, now we need to make a series of groups in the outliner to clean things up and prepare for the next stage. So select the tongue and the nose and the eyes and create a group and call that grp_extras. Now select all the primitives that need to be part of the body skin and group them. Then call this grp_body skin primitives. Duplicate that and name the new one grp_body skin. Hide the body skin primitives. Now select all of the primitives that make up the head skin and group them. Name this grp_head skin primitives. Duplicate that and just call it grp_head skin. And hide the head skin primitives group. All right, now we're going to make a single united skin for the head. Twirl down the grp_head skin group. Select all of the primitives. Freeze the transformation. And then delete history. Then go up to the Mesh menu, Booleans. Click the box next to Union. Change the intersection classification to edge. This is really important. Otherwise, if you don't change this to edge, it's going to create a lot of hidden geometry inside the model that we don't want. Then click Apply. Now, when you press Apply, it might work perfectly. But if it doesn't, it can be a little bit frustrating to work out. So let's go through some quick problem-solving tips for if the union doesn't work. Sometimes your mesh turns red and one item as part of the union turns green. And in that case, we want to just undo, and I just tend to make sure that the main mesh and the thing that you're adding both have their histories deleted and then try again. And if that doesn't work, I'd suggest saving everything, quitting out of Maya, and then reopening your scene file. Make sure you then go into File, Set Project, and set your project, because you need to do that every time you restart Maya, or Maya crashes and you have to restart, because it forgets that info randomly. And then just select the items you want to perform the union on and click Freeze several times. And then click Delete History several times. And then try the Boolean union operation again. Alright, so that's my Boolean problem solving tips. Okay, so if your teddy bear head has united properly, all you need to do is go up and freeze the transformations and delete history. Then go to the outliner and rename this as head skin. Alright, now we can make a single united skin for the body. So select all of the primitives, freeze the transformation, and then delete history. Then you've already got the union operation options open, so just click Apply, freeze the transformation, and then delete history. And then in the outliner, change the name to body skin. And at this point, we might as well hide that basic head that we imported for scale. Now, actually, I've called these head skin and body skin, but I'm just going to change them to head mesh and body mesh, just so there's nothing else called body skin and head skin in the outliner. All right, now before we optimize these meshes, we need to first smooth them. So go ahead and select the head, and then go up to the mesh menu and smooth. Then select the body and go up to the mesh menu and choose smooth. And of course, we still need to smooth those extras, the nose and the head and the tongue, but we'll do that a little bit later. So it's a really good idea to keep saving versions of your scene as you're working. And this is a point that you really want to save your scenes, because we're about to clean up the topology and that can create problems. So save your scene as something and then save your scene as another thing, so we're ready to go. All right, now we want to optimize our topology before we add hair. So we want to do this for both the head mesh and the body mesh. The process is to clean up, remesh, retopologize, and check. Those are the 4 parts of the process. So let's get started with cleanup. So make sure your mesh is selected. Go to the mesh menu and click the button next to clean up. In the pop-up, go to the edit submenu, reset settings. And then I tend to turn on faces with more than 4 sides, and concave faces, faces with holes, and non-planar faces, and laminar faces, and non-manifold geometry. And then click Apply. And if there's some sort of problem and it looks weird, you can just press Undo and deselect some of those options, then try again. And then you want to select the body and click Apply again. And when you're done, you can just close the cleanup options pop-up. If the selection is still light blue, you need to right-click and hold and choose Object Mode to get out of that. Now, if your model has turned green, so a solid green, you want to right-click and hold and go down to Assign New Material, and I just tend to go to Maya and Maya Lambert, and then it'll turn gray and it'll make it a bit easier to see. Then you can right-click and hold just in a blank area and choose Object Mode. All right, now to continue fixing the topology, with your teddy bear head selected and green, next we want to go to the mesh menu again, remesh. And then you want to select the body, go to the mesh menu again, remesh. And now we want to retopologize. So select the head and then go to the mesh menu and click the button next to retopologize. Change the target polygons to, well, I usually say around 30,000 or whatever you want, but I go around 30,000. Then click Apply. And if it prompts you, just click Ignore and Continue. It's going to take 30 seconds to a minute, depending on your computer, to process this. And once it's finished, just select the body and click Apply again. And as you spin around, if you're seeing some weirdness in the display, you might want to go up and click the Use Default Material icon. And that tends to clean it up and make it look presentable for the moment. You can then close the Retopologize Options dialog box. All right, so that's the end of the optimization process, those 4 steps. Now we want to use the sculpting tools to smooth the head and the body a bit more. So go through this process for both of them. And to get started, just make sure your mesh is selected. Go to the Mesh Tools menu, and then hover over Sculpting Tools, and then click the top of the bar of the little pop-out menu. And that's going to detach it. Now on that floating panel, double-click the Smooth tool. Then on the left-hand side, double-click the orange and grey circle. And you'll now see the options. Now to change the brush size in the viewport, you want to hold down B on the keyboard and then left click and drag, and you'll see that it adjusts the size. So smooth the model, especially the edges where the polygon primitives were combined. And you can also adjust the strength of the brush by pressing M for Mary on the keyboard, and then middle mouse click drag up and down. All right, and then just use the sculpting tools to smooth the other mesh. And what we're going to do now is smooth the eyes and the nose and the tongue before we keep going. So just go ahead and select those one at a time or together and go to the mesh menu and go smooth. And then you can close that Tool Settings dialog box and the sculpting tools. Now we need to check our UVs before we start adding hair. So we want to do this for both the head and the body meshes. Go to the UV menu, UV editor, and in that pop-up, click the Create menu and then click Automatic. This usually comes up with something that's close enough for us to use later when we're trying to paint out the areas that we don't want hair added to. So if the automatic UVs don't make the hairless areas as big continuous chunks, try to use a different UV method. But it's usually fine, so now select the body, and then go up to the UV menu, UV editor, and once again go to the Create menu, Automatic, and just make sure that that's created something with continuous blocks of UVs so you can paint on the areas you want to get rid of the fur from or the hair. All right, now we want to just right click and hold and go object mode once again, and then deselect everything so we're ready to continue. And the next thing we want to do is add materials to each of the separate meshes that we've got. So we want to select the head and then right click and go to Assign Favorite Material, Lambert. And then in the attribute editor, just rename it, start with MAT underscore, and then call it whatever it is. So in this case, head skin. And then I'm going to go ahead and select the body. And once again, favorite material, Lambert, and change this to MAT underscore body skin. Then I'm going to select the right eye and go assign favorite material, Lambert. MAT underscore eye underscore right. Then do the same for the left eye. Then I'm going to do the nose. And then I'm going to do the tongue. Now, what I usually do is go through those materials I've just made and add a basic color so I can have a general idea of what it's going to look like later on. It just helps me with my process, but you can skip this if you don't want to. And the next thing we need to do is make a backup of the meshes before we start adding hair. So let's start with the body. Click on the body mesh. Press Ctrl D to duplicate it. Rename the duplicate mesh as XGen_geo_body. Hide the original body mesh. And go through the same process with the hair mesh. So in the outliner, click on the head mesh. Press Ctrl D to duplicate it. Rename the duplicate mesh as XGen_geo_head. And then hide the original head mesh. Now in the group GRP Extras, I'm just going to go through and name all of these meshes. So nose, and then the eyes, and then the tongue. Now you want to save the scene before we're adding XGen hair, in case you want to go back to this point, which you probably will want to do. So I'm just going to save this as another iteration and add before hair to the end. Now we need to move our body mesh and head mesh to a display layer, so later on we can lock it when we need to. So select both meshes. In the channel box layer editor, at the bottom under display, you want to click the icon on the right, and that's going to create a new layer with the two meshes in it. Double click on that new layer, and just call that XGen geo_lyr, and click save. All right, and now we're going to start actually adding our hair. And we're going to go through the process on the head first, and then you can go back and do the same thing to the body. So to get started, we need to add something to the head called a hair description. So right click and hold on the head mesh and choose object mode. This just resets our selection. And now go up to the generate menu and click create description. In the pop-up window, fill out the new description name just as Teddy_headmesh_DESC. And then for create new collection named, just type in Teddy_headmesh_COLL and leave this first option to be splines, and then this next option randomly across the surface. And then for control the primitives by, choose placing and shaping guides, and then click create. You'll see in the outliner there's now going to be a Teddy_headmesh_COLL, and then if you twirl that down, you'll see various objects inside that. So press Ctrl S to save your scene. All right, now we want to start adding hair guides. Let's lock the body and head meshes so we don't accidentally click on them. So in the channel box layer editor, in the display layers, look at that layer that you created, XGen geo_lyr. Click the third box from the left twice, so it shows the letter R. Now in the XGen tab, look at the top, and click the button that's a single green hair strand and a plus icon. This is the Add or Move Guides button. Now, if you mouse over your skin, you'll see a white circle and a short vertical line that follows your mouse. What we want to do now is add guides to the right-hand side of the face and body as we're looking at it. So it's actually the character's left-hand side, but it's on the right-hand side of the screen. Later on, we're going to duplicate those guides, mirror them over to the other side, but for the moment, just make them on that right-hand side. All right, so click the skin and add guides like this. And just keep adding all the way around just on that right-hand side. In the XGen tab, click the first icon at the top, which is the large eye. This is the preview button. Now you see it looks pretty bad, but we're going to fix that. But for now, at the top of the XGen tab, just click the solid green eye. That's going to disable the hair preview for now. Now let's mirror the guides over to the other side. In the outliner, twirl down your collection, which is that green icon with the X in it, until you see your list of individual guides. Select all of them, then go to the XGen shelf and click the button with a green vertical line splitting two hair strands. This is the Mirror Selected Guides Across X-Axis button. In the XGen tab, under the Primitives tab, set the density to 20. You can raise this later, but it's a good starting point. Now look under Primitive Attributes, and for Modifier CV, I usually change this to 12. Don't change the length here. If you want to change the length, just select a guide or group of guides and scale them up in the viewport. But do change the width here, and I tend to change it to 0.05. Set the taper to 0.85 and turn off Tube Shade. It just makes it easier to see. Now we want to adjust the guides and change their size, rotation, and position. So click the solid green eye. Change to the Select tool on the left and select a guide in the viewport. Press R on the keyboard and then click drag to the right and you'll scale them upwards. Press E on the keyboard and you can rotate them around to change their orientation. Now, if you want to move one of these guides, you can press W on the keyboard, but it's not going to let you move it around. To move it, you need to go to the XGen shelf or the tab and click the icon of the single green hair with a plus icon. Then hover over the guide you want to move, hold down Control, and then you can move them. All right, now let's sculpt the guides. So basically we're changing their shape. Click the Sculpt Guides tool, which is two green hair follicles with an X with arrows on the ends. Now on the left-hand side, double-click on the Sculpt Guides tool to open its settings. Turn on Lock Length if it isn't already, and this is going to stop the guides from being overextended as you adjust them. Now hold down B and click drag the mouse left and right to adjust the radius of the brush. And when you hover over a guide, you're going to see a red highlighting, which will show you how it's going to be affected. Click and drag on the guide. If you want to sculpt more than one guide at a time, go up and deselect all. Then you can make your brush size larger by holding B on the keyboard and click dragging to the right. And then with nothing selected, you can sculpt lots of guides at once. Once you've adjusted some guides, you might also want to copy and paste their sculpt shapes. So to do that, select a guide, then right-click hold on it, and choose Copy Guide Shape. And then right-click hold on another guide, and click Paste Guide Shape. All right, now let's set up a density map, which determines which areas on the model actually have hair. So click the eye to show the hair primitives. Go to the Channel Box Layer Editor. In the display layers, look at that layer that we created earlier, and then click on that R so it turns off because the layer needs to be editable for the next steps to work. Now in the XGen tab, in the Primitives tab, under Generator Attributes near the top, you'll see a mask option, and to the right of mask, you'll see a downward triangle. So click that, and then click Create Map. In the pop-up, change the name to Teddy Head Density _ mask, and leave the map resolution, leave the start color as white, which means the entire map will start with having full density, and then click Create. Now don't start painting on your mesh just yet. At the top of the XGen panel, click the solid green eye, and that's going to hide the hair primitives. In the tool list on the left, double-click the icon of a yellow bullseye with a paintbrush. Now, a few steps after this, I actually had a massive crash. So I had to restart, and it's just another reminder of XGen just loving to crash. It just loves to crash. So anyway, let's keep going. In the pop-up, change the artisan, which is the brush, to third from the left, which is the solid blue circle. We don't want any gray in our density map. We just want to make sure our brush is solid. Now make sure the color is either pure black or pure white. Never set gray in here when you're painting density. All right, now you can go ahead and paint density onto your mesh, but you're not going to see any changes. And that's because you haven't done two things that saves the changes and makes them visible. So in that pop-up, click on Save Textures. And then back in the XGen tab, to the right of the mask text field, you must click the tiny Save icon. Then you're going to see the changes in the viewport. If you want the density of hairs to follow your map more closely, you're going to need to change the map resolution. So to do that, next to mask, click the equation icon. And in the pop-up, you'll see where you can adjust it and change that to 25. Click accept and then click on save. And that's going to make it much higher resolution. When you're painting density, if you ever lose your paintbrush, just go to the right of the mask field and click the tiny paintbrush icon. All right, now this is a teddy bear, so it doesn't really have a hair part where, part of it is combed to one side and the rest is combed to the other, but you often need to use a hair part. So I'm going to go through the process of how to set it up, and I'm going to add a part to the teddy bear's head. So in the XGen tab, in the Primitives tab, scroll down to the Region Control section. Next to Region Map, click the downward triangle on the very right-hand side and click on Create Map. In the pop-up, change the name to Hair Part _ Region Map _ Teddy Head. Change the map resolution to 30. Leave the start color as red and click Create. Now don't start painting quite yet. Click on the solid green eye to hide the hair primitives. In the tool list on the left, double-click the icon of a yellow bullseye with a paintbrush. Now change the color to yellow. There's a yellow tile, so click on that. Scroll down and under Stroke, turn off Screen Projection and Reflection. Under Stylus Pressure, turn off the stylus pressure. We don't want any fall off. Now paint onto your mesh on the left side as you're looking at the screen. So the left side of its head is going to be yellow and the right side will be red. And once you've done that, click on Save Textures in that Tool Settings pop-up. And in the XGen tab, to the right of the mask text field that you're just looking at, you must click the tiny Save icon. And there's a third thing you need to do for region control, and that is in the XGen tab, you have to go in under Region Control and change Region Mask to 1. Now, if your parting isn't working properly in some places, you might have guides that are too close to each other, which confuses Maya. So just move them apart and it should work better. When I crashed before, I think it's reset this density, so I'm going to change it back to 20. All right. Now we need to add a few modifiers to make the hair look better. We need to start with a clump modifier because you always need to add your clump modifier first. And clumping is the thing where hair sort of sticks together because of oil and grease, but it actually makes all hair look more natural, even if it's a toy. So at the top of the XGen panel, click the solid green eye to hide the hair primitives. Then click the Modifiers tab. On the right-hand side, click the button of a white diamond with a plus icon. And in the window that pops up, click on Clumping, which is in the middle of the top row. Then click OK. A red error is going to pop up, but that's normal. In the XGen panel, just scroll down to the bottom and click on Setup Maps. In the window that pops up, change the density to 2, change the mask to 0.9, click Generate, and then click Save. If you want to make further adjustments, you can click Setup Maps again, and then click Generate again, and then Save. Now let's adjust the effect. So if you select the clumping modifier in the Modifiers tab, under Clump Effect, you can make various changes. The clump defaults at 1. You can reduce the effect here, and I usually change this to 0.9. Clump Scale lets you shape the clumping curve. So on the left-hand side, there's that R. Click on that and drag it upwards to adjust it. And then on the right-hand side, you can click on the T to adjust that. And if you add any extra points in here, just don't forget to change that interpolation to smooth. Otherwise, it's going to look a bit strange. Clump variance is really touchy, so don't change that here. Use a noise modifier later on instead. Now, actually, this is a really good example of something that happens a lot, which is that the hair primitives don't update properly. If you notice things missing that should be there, turn off the hair primitives and then click the black eye icon to refresh. All right. Now, if you want to choose which parts of your mesh are actually affected by clumping, you can make a clump mask. And what I'm actually going to achieve in this example is going to look pretty terrible, but I wanted to demonstrate the technique because for most hair that I'm doing really carefully, I do actually use clump masking. So I wanted to have it as an example. All right. Make sure the mesh that it's going to apply to is selected in the outliner, and then make sure the display layer that it's on is not set to T or R. It needs to be editable for the next stuff to work. Then click the solid green icon to make sure your hair primitives are hidden. And then in the Modifiers tab, under Modifiers, make sure you click to select your clumping modifier. And then underneath that, in the first section called Clumping Modifier, go to the right of the mask text field. Click the downward facing arrow and click on Create Mask. Then in the pop-up, change the name to something like teddyhead_clump01_mask and change the map resolution to 12. Leave the start color as white and then click on Create. Now it's going to show the hair primitives again. We don't want that. So just click the solid green icon again to hide the primitives. And don't start painting quite yet. What you want to do is go to the tool list on your left-hand side and double-click the icon of a yellow bullseye with a paintbrush. Change the artisan, which is the type of brush, to the second one from the left, the soft brush profile. Scroll down and under stroke, turn on reflection. And under stylus pressure, turn off stylus pressure. And now you want to paint 3 stripes on your mesh, basically, because you want to have a light gray, which is a slightly reduced amount of clumping, then a darker gray, which is more reduced clumping, and then a very dark gray. So to do that, click the color tile and change the V to 0.6 and also set the S to 0. And what we're going to do now is paint our light gray. So there's going to be white for the rest of it, which is going to be 100% clumping. And then this is the slightly less clumping stuff. Then click the color tile again, change the V to 0.4. So this is going to be a little bit less clumping. And finally, we're going to do the least clumping, change the V to 0.3 and paint a stripe where you want the really dark gray. So this is the least amount of clumping. Now change the paint operation in Paint Effects to blur, because you then need to go through and blur the lines between the areas that you've painted. And I used automatic UVs, and blurring does not work if you're using automatic UVs and painting like this. It's going to look terrible just like this. All right, once you've done that, make sure you click Save Textures in that Tool Settings pop-up. And then you have to go to the XGen tab, and to the right of the mask text field, you have to click on that tiny save icon. Otherwise, it's not going to save it. Okay, so you've now added a clump modifier. You almost always need to add actually multiple clump modifiers. So you might want to go through and add another one. But in this case, we're going to move on to the next step. And we're going to add a cut modifier. And this makes hair look like it's been cut at some point, which pretty much all hair has been. So it's a good one to add. So at the top of the XGen panel, click the solid green eye to hide the hair primitive. So we're just looking at the guides. And click the button of a white diamond with a blue plus icon. And in the window that pops up, click on Cut. Then click OK. You'll see that the mask is set to 1 by default. And you can only really set this to 0 or 1. No decimal values in here. In the amount field, there's already a default equation, rand 0 to 0.2. So by default, it cuts between 0 and 0.2. Change this to 0.2 $, lowercase c, length. So that makes it look more natural, like the person has had a haircut recently. And for monsters and toys, it just makes it look a bit better. Under Rebuild Type, set that to Reparam. This means that your CVs aren't going to be cut in half, which is a bit confusing. You can kind of ignore that, but set this to Reparam. All right, so we added that clump modifier and the cut modifier. Now we want to add a noise modifier, and it's going to make it look more natural. So in that XGen tab, once again, click the solid green eye to hide the hair primitives. So we're just looking at guides. Then once again, click the button of a white diamond with a blue plus icon. And in the window that pops up, click on Noise. And then click OK. Now go to the Primitives tab, and under Primitive Attributes, look at your modifier CV count. It's really important to know that the noise modifier relies on this number, so it needs to be over 9 to see a proper result. I would set this to 15 or higher. 15 or 20 usually works well. Now go to the Modifiers tab, and click the noise modifier you've added to your stack. And now we just need to quickly change the values. So leave mask at 1. Don't set the frequency too high, it might crash Maya, but increase this to 3 or 4 for more waviness. Set magnitude if you want, maybe 5 sometimes works well. And then the magnitude scale, it usually defaults to a pretty harsh curve. It's better to adjust it so the R is all the way on the bottom and the T at the right-hand side is all the way to the top. And then you add 3 more points and just try to push it up so it raises at the beginning a little bit more smoothly through to the end. All right, so go through and adjust the hair as much as you like to make it look the way you need it to look. And then add a new hair description and do the same process for the body. And before you export to Unreal, it's really important that you increase the density to 300 or above usually for most hair types. I'm going to leave it at 20, but it's just so that you can see clearly what the individual hairs do in Unreal, but normally you increase it to 300. All right, let's export for Unreal. So let's do the head hair first. So in the outliner, click on the head collection, which is going to be a green folder with an X on it, and go to the top Generate menu, convert to interactive groom. In the pop-up, click on Convert. In the outliner, select the new interactive groom collection that it's just made. So it's an X icon with 3 stacked green squares. Now go to the XGen Interactive Groom Editor tab. So not the XGen tab, but the XGen Interactive Groom Editor tab. And then go up to its Descriptions menu, hover over Cache, and click on Export Cache. And then in the pop-up, change the time range to current frame, and type in a name, So Teddy underscore head underscore fur, and click export. Now let's do the same thing for the body hair. So select the body collection in the outliner, go to the top generate menu, convert to interactive groom. In the pop-up, click on convert. In the outliner, select the new interactive groom collection. Now go to the XGen interactive groom editor tab, descriptions menu, cache, export cache, and type in a name, Teddy underscore body underscore fur, and click export. All right, so next what we need to do is export the skin meshes. So the actual body and the head that's underneath the fur. And we need each of those as an FBX. All right, so in the outliner, select all the items in the extra group and the body skin and the head skin. Then go to File menu, Export Selection, and make sure on the right-hand side, you've got Autodesk Media Entertainment as the template. Change the drop-down at the bottom to FBX Export, add the name as Skin Meshes, and click Export Selection. Okay, now let's quickly make some textures in Substance 3D Painter, just to show the general process. Go to File, New. In the pop-up, click the Select button near the top. Select your skinmeshes.fbx file. Change the template to Unreal Engine 4. Change the document resolution to 4096. Make sure Use UV Tile Workflow is enabled. And make sure it's set to Preserve UV Tile Layout. Make sure Auto Unwrap is turned off. Then click OK. Now we just need to bake our starting textures. So click the croissant logo. Change the output size to 8192. Turn on the option Use Low Poly Mesh as High Poly Mesh. And then click on Bake Selected Textures. That's going to take a little while. And when the process is finished, click on Return to Painting Mode. Now we just need to start changing the materials. So on the right-hand side, click on the first material that you want to change, and then go through and change it however you want. And then go through each material, etc., and change them. And then once you're finished, you need to export the textures. If you haven't changed the names of the materials or adjusted anything, you don't need to export the mesh, but if you have, then you do. So for this one, let's just export the textures. So go to the File menu and click Export Textures. Make sure the output template is set to Unreal Engine 4. Choose where you want to output the textures, and then click Export. All right, so we finished making those textures. Now let's transfer everything to Unreal Engine. So to get started with that, we need to create a new Unreal project. So launch the engine, click on Film Video Live Events, blank, turn on Ray Tracing, name your project, and click Create. When it opens, go to the Edit menu, Plugins, type in Groom, and turn on the Alembic Groom Importer, but don't restart Unreal yet. Once again, go to the Edit menu, and this time go to Project Settings, type in Ray, R-A-Y, and then if you have an RTX card, you're going to want to adjust some of these things. So you're going to want to turn on support for hardware ray tracing, and turn on Ray Trace Shadows, and then go ahead and restart the Unreal project. Now let's import the meshes for the head and the body of our character. So go to your content browser, right-click, and go Import, and find the skinmeshes.fbx file. In the pop-up, make sure you set the material import method to create new materials. Click Import All. Now let's import the textures that we made in Substance 3D Painter. So make a new folder and call it Textures. And then open it. Drag all the textures from Windows Explorer into the content browser. Now open the settings of the content browser and change it to columns so you can clearly see the name of the textures. Now, what you need to do is all of the ones that aren't base color, so all of the ones that say normal and then the occlusion, etc., open them up and turn off sRGB. Then you need to go through the materials one by one that were created when you imported the meshes, and drag in the texture files and connect them. So let's do the base color first. So the base color tile's RGB output needs to go into the base color input of the main tile. Then for the normal texture, you want to connect its RGB output into the normal input of the main tile. Then drag in the occlusion roughness metallic texture. And connect the R from that into the ambient inclusion. And the G from that into roughness. And the B from that into metallic. Then go up and click Apply, then Save, and you can close that material. Then you just need to go through the rest of the materials and do the same thing. And once you've done that, we can move on to importing the hair. So in your content browser, just right-click, Import, find your first hair alembic, and click to import. Then in the content browser, just right-click and import once again, and find your second hair alembic, and import that. Right now, let's create a character blueprint, which will contain all of our meshes and grooms, and we'll set them all up. So in the content browser, right-click and choose Blueprint Class. Then click Actor. Rename this as BP_Teddy Bear. Double-click to open that up. Select all the meshes in the content browser and drag them into the blueprint editor. So that's the meshes done. Now let's do the grooms. So we'll first add the head groom. So in the blueprint editor, in the component tab, click the Add button, type in groom, and choose groom. Rename this component as head_hair. Now select that groom, and in the details panel, under groom, change the groom asset dropdown to be your head groom. At the top of the details panel, under transform, change rotation to -90, and then 0, and then 180. Then below that, change the hair width to 0.05 and the hair tip scale to 0.01. Right, now let's add the body groom. So in the blueprint editor, in the component tab, click the Add button, type in groom, and choose groom. Rename this component as body_hair. Now select that groom, and in the details panel, change the groom asset dropdown to be your body groom. At the top of the details panel, change rotation to -90, 0, 180. Change the hair width to 0.05 and the hair tip scale to 0.01. Alright, now from the content browser, drag the BP teddy bear into your scene. Reset the location and rotation in the Details tab. You might want to adjust the light source Just rotate it so it shines more directly on the teddy bear. And the next thing we need to do is change the body groom color so it has the same colors as the skin. So in the content browser, right-click and choose Material. Name the new material MAT_body groom color. And then double-click to open that up. Click on the existing tile in the material graph. And in the details panel, change the shading model dropdown to hair. And then at the top of that details tab, type in hair, then enable the option used with hair strands. Now right-click in the graph just to the left of the existing tile and type in hair. Then click on hair attributes. Move that new hair attributes tile left a bit to make room. Then from the content browser, drag in the base color texture that you made in Substance 3D Painter for the body mesh. And place it between these two tiles. Now from the hair attributes tile, connect the root UV output into the UV's input of the base color texture tile. Then connect the RGB output of that base color texture tile into the base color input of the main tile. Now click Save. Now we just need to attach that new material to the body hair. So in the content browser, find the hair alembic that you imported for the body hair and double click on it. Click the Material tab at the top. And at the top to the right of Material Slots, click the plus icon so it adds a new material slot. Then just change the drop-down to be your new material, so MAT_body groom color. Alright, now just go through the same thing for the head. So create a new material, set its shading model to hair, etc. And just keep in mind that the hair was only set to a density of 20 inside of Maya, so it looks pretty sparse, and we left a lot of the settings on default, so it doesn't look great. A fast way to get a better result in this case is actually to use one of the XGen presets. So let's quickly pop back to Maya and do that, and then import that into Unreal and see the difference. So back in Maya, save your scene as something else. And then in the outliner, delete the XGen items, and then select the head mesh for the teddy bear again and go up to Generate, XGen Library. Click on the library path on the left. And then on the right-hand side, you can see there's a bear preset. Right-click and go Import Preset Bear. In the pop-up, set a description name, and then a collection name, and click Import. And if you go through the settings, you can see that it's set to a density of about 300, and that's why it's a denser result, obviously. So we just need to convert this into an interactive groom so we can export it easily. So just go to the Generate menu, Convert to Interactive Groom, then click Convert. And then in the XGen Interactive Groom Editor tab, go up to the Descriptions submenu, Cache, Export Cache. Make sure it's set to current frame, and choose a name, and click Export. Then just go through that same process for the body to add a groom with the bear preset to it, and then export that as an alembic. And then in Unreal, you can just go ahead and import those two new .abc files. And you can assign them to the bear. You'll need to set the hair width, of course, and adjust the tip scale. And of course, you want to change the materials. And you can see that the result is a denser fur. All right, so that is the process of making a teddy bear roughly with Maya and Substance 3D Painter, and then going into Unreal. And as I said at the intro, you can use this process to make all sorts of rough things for previs, and then you can go back and refine it later on. I hope this is helpful to somebody out there, and I'd love if you leave a comment down below if you find it helpful, and let me know if you know faster ways to do any of these things. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much.